Israel's facing increased international criticism, including from its closest allies. Its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a political crisis. He will likely be voted out once the dust settles, along with his hardline cabinet.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire for at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
US Vice President Kamala Harris has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, saying people there are starving. It comes after Hamas refused to attend truce talks. Israel refused to attend truce talks with Hamas in Egypt. Well, let's get the very latest on this and the hopes, possibly, of there being some sort of breakthrough to end the violence. The Times Middle East correspondent Samir Al-Atrush joins us now. Samir, there were hopes that maybe, just maybe, there might be an end to the Israeli bombing in Gaza, but Israel refusing to attend the talks. Where does that leave us?
Well, there is immense pressure on both sides to reach a compromise and agree a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire, by March 10, when the holy month of Ramadan for Muslims begins. Israel's refused to send a delegation because they're demanding a list of hostages held by Hamas who remain alive. Hamas hasn't provided that list. They've argued that they want a ceasefire agreed first, and they've also argued that they are not holding all the hostages. They claim that some of them are being held by other factions, which sounds as though that they don't want to offer this information until they get more concessions from the Israelis. But there is a lot of pressure on Hamas, obviously, from the mediators, from the international community, and hopefully they realize that people in Gaza, first and foremost, would like this conflict to end. But the decision ultimately rests with Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, who's been described as very, very obstinate and maybe a bit detached from reality. The situation in Gaza right now, as the U.S. Vice President mentioned, is dire. The UN has said that about 500,000 people, if not more by now, are on the brink of starvation. Aid isn't getting in enough quantities. So there's the clock is ticking, and there are hopes that Hamas would climb down on some of their demands. They're demanding a complete Israeli withdrawal and a permanent ceasefire, not a temporary 6-week ceasefire. But hopefully, the mediators hope that this could all be worked out over the coming days.
I mean, it is the deadline, the sort of the aim of trying to find a temporary ceasefire is there, like you're saying, for the start of Ramadan. Is there a sense that once there is a ceasefire, it might hold beyond that, given that this latest conflict was triggered by the Hamas attacks in Israel, and then Israel's several months now worth of response? Where would we be at the end of Ramadan?
Well, the hope is that once you have a ceasefire in place, the war's momentum is lost. No one's come out of this war looking good, obviously. Hamas, they started the war. It was a war that nobody had asked for, not even the Iranian backers and Iranian-backed allies in the region like Hezbollah. It's a war that Israel clearly didn't want. It was an attack that Israel didn't want, but nobody's come out of it better. Gaza is largely destroyed. Once Hamas comes out of the rubble, if there's a ceasefire, it's reasonable to assume that they won't be treated, they won't be welcomed hospitably by the people of Gaza. Israel's facing increased international criticism, including from its closest allies. Its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a political crisis. He will likely be voted out once the dust settles, along with his hardline cabinet. The hope is that once the war stops for 6 weeks, it'll lose momentum and it'll be replaced by talks for a long-term solution. That's what the mediators are hoping for. That's what the U.S. and Britain are hoping for. They would like to start talks for a political resolution to this, for a Palestinian state, for the reform of the Palestinian Authority, because the conventional wisdom for years, if not decades, has been that if this issue is not resolved, it is a powder keg.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, that argument was seen as hackneyed and tired and no longer true. You had the Abrahamic Accords in 2020 with several Arab countries signing agreements with Israel. Before this war blew up, you had Saudi Arabia on the path to normalization with Israel. So that argument was seen as old and no longer true. But what the crisis in Gaza has done is that it's brought it back to the fore, and it's been a reminder that indeed, if you do not have a resolution to this conflict, it can go off at any moment. It can draw in militia from across the region. For the first time in history, you've had a non-state actor, the Houthis in Yemen, imposing a naval blockade on a passageway that counts for about a tenth of the world's commercial traffic. So I think, again, the urgency of finding some sort of political resolution has never been so felt by the international community. And the hope is that, they will go ahead with that once the guns fall silent.
Hamas claims it wants a ceasefire. Well, there is a deal on the table. And as we have said, Hamas needs to agree to that deal. Let's get a ceasefire. Let's reunite the hostages with their families. And let's provide immediate relief to the people of Gaza. What we are seeing every day in Gaza is devastating. We have seen reports of families eating leaves or animal feed, women giving birth to malnourished babies with little or no medical care, and children dying from malnutrition and dehydration. As I have said many times, too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And just a few days ago, we saw hungry, desperate people approach aid trucks, simply trying to secure food for their families after weeks of nearly no aid reaching northern Gaza. And they were met with gunfire and chaos. Our hearts break for the victims of that horrific tragedy and for all the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering from what is clearly a humanitarian catastrophe. And the Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. They must open new border crossings. They must not impose any unnecessary restrictions on the delivery of aid. They must ensure humanitarian personnel, sites, and convoys are not targeted. And they must work to restore basic services and promote order in Gaza so more food, water, and fuel can reach those in need. Hamas cannot control Gaza, and the threat Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that has vowed to repeat October 7th again and again until Israel is annihilated. Hamas has shown no regard for innocent life, including for the people of Gaza, who have suffered under its rule for almost 2 decades. And Hamas still holds dozens of hostages for nearly 150 days now. Innocent men and women, including American citizens who were brutally taken from their homes and from a concert. I will repeat, the threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated.